Now, I've been working in extension and in forages for quite some time. And I will say over that time, at least my thinking and others has evolved quite a bit, especially as it pertains to both thinking about forage yields, but also thinking about what does quality mean and what's most important to us. And most of the time, earlier in my career, and actually even still today, if I go out to a farm and they pull out a forage test, mostly what I hear about is look at the protein value of my first cut. Look at what I got for protein. You see my crude protein, 22%, 18%. And so people have, for better or for worse, really been focused on something, actually, a quality metric that, although important and critical, really in the whole scheme of things, especially if you're focused on feeding mostly grass on your farm, isn't really that important. Okay, so really today in this presentation, but also into the future, what should be really the most important to you is how much of that forage those cows can actually eat, right? You want them to eat as much as possible for lots of reasons. Well, A, to fill up, B, to make more milk, C, to make more meat, okay? But that's what's for dinner for most of us here in the Northeast, grass-based diets. But there's limitations to how much a cow can eat of that grass, right? They get full. They get full pretty quick, especially not if the protein is too low, but if the fiber, specifically the digestible fiber, isn't good enough, okay? The cows have to be able to digest the fiber of that grass relatively quickly so that they can eat more of it, right? You want to fill them up, you want them to utilize that, and then you want them to be going back for more and more and more and more. We're trying to push more and more forage into our animals' diets. You just heard from Sarah Flack all about this opportunity in grass-only milk. Well, she talked to you about all the challenges and opportunities there. And one of the primary challenges is getting enough nutrition and getting enough feed into those cows to just sustain them, but then also to make milk. And really, that does center around having digestible fiber, okay? And so forage quality for us is maximizing energy in that grass. Now, generally, when we think about energy, most people are thinking about buying grain, corn, starch, right? That's where a lot of people get their energy from, the majority of it, in dairy and beef, right? Well, for many of you here, you're here to learn about grass production. You need to get that energy from the grass. So how do we get the most energy out of that grass? Okay. So here's a picture of a cell, okay, in a forage. And we have the inside of the cell, and that's where all, most of everything in that cell is highly, highly digestible. So that's where a lot of the protein is and soluble carbohydrates. And that's similar to what we would find like in grain, okay? Vitamins, minerals, all that stuff is packed inside of the cell wall. So we want to optimize that. We want to have as much of that as possible, okay? But then you have the cell wall. And that's the part that we really focus on managing so that we can have that cell wall as digestible as possible. And that's where a lot of limitation lies, because in the cell wall, that's where the lignin is. Yes. I don't know why it's not. Can't you see it? I'm seeing it. I don't know, Jen, or do we know? I don't know. It's all making sense to me. Okay, we'll have to use a different way. Close your eyes. Picture this.
You can totally do that.
All right, so again, we have this cell wall. It's the wall of the cell, and that's what holds all the guts in, right? So it's got to be rigid, and it's composed of lignin, cellulose, and hemicellulose. And so when you hear the word lignin, you probably automatically think like not digestible, which that is true. Most lignin is not digestible or very, very, very slowly digestible. So we want to limit the amount of lignin in your plants. Okay, and there's different ways to do that. And then you have the cellulose and the hemicellulose, and there's a little bit of pectin in there also. But our real opportunity is getting digestibility, getting energy out of the cellulose and the hemicellulose. Okay. Now, to do that, there are things that we can control. And then, of course, there's all the things in agriculture we can't control. And really what we want to focus on is, well, what in this system can we control to get more energy out of the grass? Okay.
And
dang.
Okay.
Small children in here. We can't be.
There we go.
Swear words.
We never know why it starts working, but sometimes it does. So there we go.
Okay. Thank you.
Looks right on the screen.
It looks like a cell wall. Exactly like a cell wall. Okay. All right. So that's the cell wall. Let's see now. There we go. All right. So what ends up impacting the plant sugar and also the fibers? And again, there's the things we can control and the things that we can't. And you can see actually there's quite a long list of things we can control to try to optimize that. And then of course there's the weather, which we cannot control. And then there's seasonality as well, right? Like the cooler it is, the more digestible your forage is. When it gets hot, that's when lignin starts to build in the plants. Okay. And that's not something we can control. And it also makes us think about opportunities though, right? So when it's really hot in the heat of the summer, we know those forages are going to become more lignified, less digestible versus in the spring, right? That first harvest, first grazing, those are highly, highly digestible forages. Lots of energy out of them, lots of nutrition. So just thinking about how the weather impacts and seasonality impacts forages, can help us manage them, but we can't change that. Things we can change are forage species. Some of us can do that, right? Species selection is actually really, really important here. There is a big difference in how much sugar and energy grasses, different species, and even different varieties can produce. Okay, so we'll talk about that a little bit. Field conditions are really important. Timing of harvest or grazing, critical. Harvest management, very, very, very important. And storage conditions. Okay, so if you are putting up stored feed, which most people are, 30 below zero, 10 feet of snow, not a lot of grass to graze here. And so most people are trying to put up stored feed, and that's just as important as the feed that you're grazing, right? You're trying to maintain productivity all year long. All right, I'm kind of stepping away in and out, and that might be annoying something.
No, you're good. The camera should track you. You're just a little faster.
That I like that. I like that. Faster than a camera. Now I used to be faster than a speeding bullet, but once I hit 45, I'm now just faster than a camera. Okay. All right. So species selection, we have primarily our perennial pastures and hay ground, right? And that is the most productive for us when it's cool and wet. perennial cool season forages is what predominates the landscape in the Northeast. Perennial cool season grasses mostly, and legumes too, white clover, red clover, etc. Okay, so what about hot and dry goes well with perennial cool season? Not much. Okay, so perennial cool season forages perform the best when it's cool, and also when there's plenty of moisture. So that's why these grasses are so robust in the spring, and you have trouble keeping up with them because that's when they want to grow. That's what they like. And then the minute the heat of the summer comes in, whew, things really slow down. And the other thing that goes down, not just their growth, right? They go into survival mode, basically. They start to go dormant and they grow very, very, very slow because that is a survival mechanism for them. But that means the quality is also much less during that time period, right? And there's opportunities for us to grow other species that are very highly digestible and full of sugar that are not cool season perennial forages, but we don't necessarily have time to talk about that today, okay? Those would be things like sorghum sudan grass, millets, okay? Those are grasses that are warm season annuals. Warm season. They like warm weather. That's when they're most productive. And those particular species, right, millets and sorghum sudan grasses, Sudan grass, all of those actually are also very, very high in sugar when they're growing in the conditions that they like, okay? So there is an opportunity to fill that little void there, but we, again, we can talk about it. I don't really care what we talk about. It's up to you. You're here, you paid money. We talk about whatever you want. I was not planning on focusing on that, but I definitely could if people want to, chat about that. Lots going on in that space, okay? And then you'll see your cool season grasses pick up pace again, right? Once it starts to cool off in the fall, things start to come on again. Now, last year, drought, yeah, nobody wants to talk about that. But, think about those years where it's kind of cool all summer and it's really wet. Boy, those grasses grow. But that's, really, folks, what we're going to be dealing with into the future is being able to adapt to hot, to cold, to dry, to wet. And I think we have to realize what the limitations are for our current setup, and you either are going to have more land, right, to really spread out that grazing season if we start going through these extended dry periods, or we're going to have to think about incorporating other species into the mix if you can, and figure out how to manage this. There are options, but again, it's a little bit different than what we've had to do in the past. And I think people are realizing that we do have limitations in perennial cool season grass. All right. Okay. So as far as energy goes, we also know that things like small grains and some of these sorghum sudan grasses, small grain silage, they are packed full of energy. So there are opportunities to kind of grow those annual forages and increase the amount of energy you're producing on your farm. And again, especially at times when your cool season forages aren't where they need to be. So if you are trying to optimize milk production, meat production, these are some of the things you may have to think about if you're not going to buy grain, okay? Oh, I guess I am going to talk about annual forages. How'd that get in there? Well, I only have 45 minutes or so, so I can't talk about everything. Okay, well, just quickly, summer annuals, these get planted, they got so much flexibility. So that's the thing I like about these. You can really start planting them really at the end of May, and you can plant these warm season annuals basically into July. So a lot of opportunity and flexibility there. I will say, you know, and somebody's going to ask me this, I imagine. Well, can we seed them into our perennial pasture and get some production that way? I haven't seen, and if somebody's had success with that, go ahead and raise your hand and prove me wrong. I haven't seen a lot of success with that strategy. Okay. Like just going out and planting them into your pasture and seeing what takes. If that's what you want to do and you want to see what takes, you will get a couple of really sick looking BMR, some sorghum sedan grasses growing out there, and it'll be likely you've spent more than what you got. So these crops really are they do best when you're tilling the ground, you're preparing the soil, you know, and you're giving them all the attention to them. Okay, they're needy, but the amount of tonnage you can get off of these things is pretty phenomenal. We've seen, you know, 5 tons of dry matter and even more in the right year, but usually you're going to get a couple of tons. Okay, and you can graze them multiple times. So if you're not going to take them off as stored feed, you can graze them usually up to 3 times every basically, you know, 2 to 3 weeks. You can go back out and graze them. So, you know, it's could be worth the investment, again, depending on what you're looking for. The other cool season annuals, you know, you have brassicas. Those do okay. If you seed them into pasture, you'll get a little something there. But again, they do best on their own or in a mix with cool season grains like oats or triticale. And then the winter grains, they are like rocket fuel. Okay. If you're a dairy producer and you're looking for dairy quality feed, having those small grains, you know, to harvest a stored feed or even to graze, they are really, really high in digestible energy, you know, both in the fall and in the spring. So these are great feeds to get more energy and biomass in the fields in those shoulder seasons. Okay. And they're also an opportunity for folks to, you know, get a little more energy on the farm and diversify the rotation a bit. If you are into reseeding, right, you want to be reseeding fields, and I'm going to make a pitch for that. It helps to break up that sod, break up the rotation so that you can then reseed perennial forages. So that's a nice thing about some of these annuals. All right, so the grasses themselves, the perennial cool season grasses, they also kind of vary in their, you know, productivity and when they produce the most. Some of these grasses like tall fescue. Wow, that's really small. I can't even read it up here. Can you guys read it? Tall fescue. This is a third one down. Tall fescue, and I know if you're grazing, you don't like that. And maybe if you're a beef producer, you'll graze it, but definitely not in dairy. But I will say, you know, as a stored forage, haying it, and if you are into grazing it, I think tall fescue, now there's these soft leafed ones. Has anybody tried those? Anybody dared? No, I know you're shaking your head. I saw somebody just flat out shake their head at me. Flat out. They didn't even hide it. You know, they're and I get it, but I will tell you the reason that tall fescue next to orchard grass is the most widely used forage in the United States is because it does well in wet conditions and it does well in dry conditions. So in those periods where we have extremely, you know, long periods of dryness, tall fescue is a grass that it goes dormant later under much higher temperatures. Okay. So, it can withstand the stress a little bit. The other thing that tall fescue really likes, if you're one of these people, which there's a lot of these people, it really likes to be mowed a lot and low to the ground. So if you're one of those, it likes that. It actually does a little bit better under very frequent mowing and quite low. Okay. So if you're into constant every 28-day schedule and you like to pick a little bit of soil off the ground when you're mowing, you know, that tall fescue is the grass for you. Okay. Most other grasses very much, they dislike that. Okay. So it's a hardy grass. So shake your head, you disbelievers. But, and, you know, Roger's in the back. He hates tall fescue. Yep. And I planted some on his farm, and he's reminds me almost every day how much he hates it. But, but it is, you know, I think a grass that if it fits into your system, moving into kind of this more uncertain climate, it can be beneficial. All right. Okay. So species selection, we've started talking about this, and I don't even have tall fescue on here because I've been told I can't grow it here, so I don't always include it in my trials, even though I think it's a great option. Really, this table here, or whatever what is this thing called? It's a figure. This figure here, this bar chart, is really to show you the difference in species. Okay, and productivity, and something that we look at more now, which is digestible fiber. So in the old days, we only looked at NDF. Everybody heard of that? Neutral detergent fiber. So that's the amount of fiber that's in the forage when you send it into the lab. Okay, and we would look at that and say, oh, we want that to be below 55 or 50 or whatever. Okay, we want it to be low. We don't want a lot of fiber. Well, fiber is not bad if the cows can, again, digest it quickly, right? So now we look at digestible fiber. If you have fiber, how digestible is it? We really want that number over 65%. And then, of course, the higher it is, and you don't want it too high, but the higher it is, it means the cows can utilize that. They can utilize the energy in it. Okay, and then they can eat more. So we really want grasses that are higher in digestible energy, digestible fiber. Sorry about that. And then we also want them to yield a lot. We want tons of digestible fiber per acre, not just tons of feed. But how much of that feed are we pulling off can actually be digested through that cow relatively quickly? Okay, so we're looking at not just yields, but how good is that yield? So digestible yield per acre is really what we want to start looking at. Okay, so in this graph, you can see that meadow brome. Is anybody here growing meadow brome? Okay, what do you think about it? And it's okay, I haven't formed an opinion yet, so you can't go against mine.
I kind of wonder how much is that extra digestibility, inherent digestibility worth, because it doesn't yield as good and it's not nearly as persistent as
the meadow brome. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Meadow fescue or meadow brome?
Sorry, meadow brome.
Okay.
Wrong question. Wrong answer.
No, that's fine. You're meadow brome. You're trying meadow brome, or you're trying meadow fescue.
Meadow fescue.
Oh yeah. Okay. No, we can. Yeah, I agree with you on that. Anybody growing meadow brome? Yeah, it's kind of a new thing. I'm not sure. It's the hairiest thing I've ever seen. I don't even know how else to describe it. You can literally pet it. It's like has a lot of pubescence on it. I guess that's the term. But I don't know. That was funny. Okay. you know, watch what I say sometimes, but, so I asked if anybody's using it because it's in our plots, but I'm not sure if a cow would actually want to eat it. I feel like it would tickle its nose and it would just, okay. So it appears to be highly productive, as you can see here, good yields, really high digestibility, but I'm just not sure yet, you know, how adaptable it would be to a grazing operation. The other thing you can see here, see those three bars there, or 4 bars. There's like the dark one and then the lighter one and the striped one. Those are the different cuttings, the yields from the different cuttings. So you can see with meadow brome and orchard grass, the first, second, and third cut are pretty evenly distributed. Okay. That's pretty important. Actually, that's really important. If you look down to like Kentucky bluegrass and even perennial ryegrass, you can see a lot of the yields in the first cut, and then there's not like a whole lot after that. All right. So you don't want a one-hit wonder. And Kentucky bluegrass is just that. It puts everything it has into the first cut. And then essentially after that, you're not getting a whole lot out of it. And the Kentucky bluegrass here is even improved Kentucky bluegrass. These are varieties, like varieties you can buy to seed. And so, you know, I feel like in today's climate, having stands that are predominantly Kentucky bluegrass put you at risk because they're not going to produce throughout the season. They shut down pretty early when it gets dry. They're also highly, highly prone to rust, which some of you have probably seen over the last few years. So, you know, they're not as digestible as some of the other species either. And I realize this is what kind of dots our landscape mostly, but again, something for you to think about. If you're really trying to get energy per acre and lots of it, that it's not going to come from Kentucky bluegrass. All right. So just for what it's worth, it's just information for you. But again, given the climate extremes that we're seeing, I think we have to really be thinking about trying to get some species out there that are going to be able to keep producing under a variable climate, produce across the season, and have lots of nutrition and digestibility to feed the animals. Otherwise, you're going to be buying feed. That costs money too. All right. We'll skip over that. Seasonal distribution. I was just talking about that. Again, you don't want just the one-hit wonder. You want more even distribution across the season. All right. Again, lots of information here. Mostly this is to show that it's not just about picking orchard grass. Okay. It's not just about picking meadow fescue or meadow brome. The varieties themselves are really, really different in how they perform both yield and quality. Now, if you need this information, don't squint now. You can go on the internet and it's all there, and like report after report after report on our website. So you can go print all these things out and look at all the varieties. The point is it matters. Variety matters. Now, there's probably not a lot of corn farmers in here. I know there's at least one or two because I see them in the audience, but you know, when you're growing corn or you're growing soybeans, or even if you have a vegetable garden, you pour through that seed catalog, don't you? It's sitting right next to you. It's winter time. You got your feet up. You're watching TV. You're looking at the pictures, looking at the corn yields, you know, you're just so into it. How many people do that with their grass species? And I'm at the place where people should be raising their hands. Okay. Right? Get your hands. I don't want you to lie, but okay. This is important. You know, you should really be putting that extra effort into looking at the varieties and varietal performance, just like you do with anything else, because it is really different. So you can print all of our research reports off, or you can read them online. And we've tested hundreds of varieties, all the different species, okay? And you can see what's doing best over time, etc. But again, you can see here, you know, you got an orchard grass there, that one, the really bad one there, Hussar, however it's pronounced, I don't know. It's only producing 2.5 tons of dry matter. And then you have, holy moly, you have Neva or Olaf to the edge there, and that's up near 5. They're all grown in the same spot, same management, same fertility. You want 2.5 tons? You want 5 tons? I don't know. It's up to you, right? And then, of course, I already said this, it's not just about the yields. What's the digestibility of those varieties? All right. Okay, so variety matters. We do the same type of evaluations with legumes. And I know somebody gonna raise their hand. Is it in a mixed stand? Because that's what we do. And I know that. But we have to see how they do perform alone, because otherwise it's hard to pick out in a mixed plot which one is which. So, you know, we do the same thing with the legumes, trying to get an understanding of how these legumes are performing. And I do know some are better suited to mixtures than others. But again, in order to get a view of the actual variety, we grow them separately. And so we do the same, like I said, with alfalfa, bird's foot trefoil, red clover, and white clover. Now, I'm going to say something that could be controversial in this type of audience. You guys ready? Yeah. Yes, we are. Okay. Remember I said earlier, it's not just about the protein. We have plenty of protein. Okay. And what I've learned from my friends that are in the nutrition world is that cows in particular are super efficient at utilizing protein. And we overfocus on it. Focus too much. Okay. And really what we're lacking, especially in our grass-based systems, is energy. And the energy comes from grass. Okay. And so really my perspective on these legumes now at this point is that they are there to feed the grass. And not so much to add more protein to a pasture that's already high in protein most of the time. Mike Thresher, do you agree more or less? See, okay, good. One person, okay? But I think, you know, people, we need to think about that. Now, that's almost more important, right, than just having people else want more legumes out there. Well, we do need some more legumes out there, but again, to feed the grass. Because grass needs a lot of nitrogen. And if we're going to get yields of grass, of highly digestible protein, or highly digestible fiber, okay, we need to make sure they have what they need to grow. And of course, they need all kinds of things, but what they're generally mostly lacking in is nitrogen. Sometimes potassium too, but easier to get. So, you know, allowing legume growth, promoting some legume growth in the grass to support the grass is kind of where we're at this point. And like I said, here's just a picture. These are all orchard grasses, looking at them all at the same time and how different they are, right? Those are same day, same ones. So they are really different in how well they regrow, how well they do in the drought, how well they do in the fall versus the spring. And we have tons of data on this. So I would ask that you use it. That's what we have it there for. We do this for you. Okay, so you have the information. Oh, I feel like I'm not going to get very far. What time? Oh, 11:19. Go. Oh, I got plenty of time. Okay. First cut. First harvest. So we're going to, and this is the same, for grazing too, but I would say this will be a little more focused on, forage harvest. So we know we want a timely first cut to optimize quality. Now, the best quality feed that we have been getting in the last 5 years, maybe 10 years, the potential is from the first cut. Okay. It used to be we focus on the second cut. But in today's climate, getting that timely first cut generally always gives us usually the best yields, but also the most digestible fiber because it is grown usually in cool and moist conditions. So usually the first cut, again, if it's harvested timely, and we know what timely is, I hope, right, before it heads out, it should have the most digestible fiber that you are going to see throughout the entire growing season. And theoretically, you should get, right, the most yield there too. All right. So these species and varieties differ in heading dates. And some people hate orchard grass because it heads out in April, right? Okay. Some people like meadow fescue because it heads out at the end of May and June. The yields aren't as good often as orchard grass, but it heads out later. All right. So Kentucky bluegrass, 3rd week of May. All right. So you can just see here the variety. I think you can see it. The varieties and the species and the range of heading dates. Now, if you are an individual that is not always as prompt with that first cut as you want to be, right? Well, I got a lot of stuff going on. I can't always get out there early. I'm just not ready. Or trying to get the cows out and fixing fence. I've got to spread the manure. I got so many things to do. Maybe you should think about a species and varieties that are late heading to match your management and where you're at on your farm. Okay. So, it isn't always about how much yields. If you can't manage what you put out there, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day because you're not taking full advantage, of that variety or species. Okay. So a species like meadow fescue, which I 100% agree with Caleb, it's promoted as highly, highly digestible, which generally it is. But its yields are, about a ton less, maybe 2, not always as winter hardy. There's some limitations there for sure. But it does have a lot of late heading varieties. And that can be really beneficial for people, both in pastures, right? And also when you're making hay. But so doesn't orchard grass. Not all orchard grass heads out in April. Okay. It's really, again, about selecting those late heading varieties and matching that with, again, your management, what you're trying to do and accomplish. And that's why I started by saying, I know a lot of us are in landscapes and situations where we are not going to be tilling fields up, right? I know that. I live in Vermont my entire life. I know what the landscape's like here. So I understand the limitations people are dealing with. But I think there are opportunities to incorporate new species, whether you're tilling or not. And there are opportunities if you are tilling and in rotations to really enhance productivity and quality coming off of your farm. Doop. I don't know why I made that noise. Sorry about that. Okay, diversity in the field. So like I said, we test all these things in single species plots again, so we can evaluate them and look at them and see how they regrow and see how each one yields and quality of them all. But at the end of the day, we do know that diversity in the field is critical to success, to productivity. And basically having that diversity, you can sort of hedge your risk against all kinds of things, pests being one of them, diseases and such. So I do support having all of that diversity in the field. It's just making sure that you can match the diversity with your goals and management. Okay, so you don't want a mismatch of things just to have things, right? And I think, I don't have the answers exactly to, what you should combine with what, but it is a consideration, right? Diversity is great, but you also have these goals of getting X number of tons, feeding, making sure the cows get some kind of nutrition, whatever your goals are with your forage. So adding in a bunch of things that aren't going to help you accomplish certain goals, may or may not be the direction to go. Again, these are things you have to think about when you're creating diversity in your field. Like, what is it that you're trying to achieve, that you have to achieve, right, for your business? And then goals that you also want to achieve, maybe to meet other interests or whatever is going on. But I do think that people need to really pay attention to what they're putting together at the end of the day. And I will maybe make a plug also for being cautious of buying mixes and not knowing what's in the mix, only because the name sounds really cool. Right? Money maker, milk maker, gonna be rich maker. This will grow anywhere on your farm, irregardless of how heavy or wet the soil is, right? Clay buster. We all want the answers. We all want the best, but I would also caution you to make sure that even though it sounds great, and it probably can do what it's saying, will it do it for you? Do the species in that mix even grow here in Vermont or New Hampshire? And then what are the varieties? Okay. Like, you could have a bunch of orchard grass in there and they're all early heading varieties. And you're going to be mad when you put it out there. Okay. All right. All righty. I don't know. 11:30. Okay. So I was making a plug for grass mixture or grass legume mixtures. And again, thinking about really looking at this from a fertility perspective, trying to produce more grass. And we do see advantages, especially in yield, when we add legumes to the mixture. We can see a ton or more yield advantage when we do that. And again, I will say grasses only, which predominate the landscape, again, in our area, can only produce, decent yields with plenty of fertility. The grasses themselves, most of what I see in our region are 2-ton dry matter yields off of fields. And people can tell me all kinds of things. But without any fertility, that's likely you're getting a 1 to 2 tons of dry matter. Okay. When you start adding fertility to those fields, as you would expect, right, the yields do start to go up. And the quality also starts to go up. And, here's just grass alone, grass with clover. Okay. The yield difference here. Yes. Doesn't matter what species it is. Okay. They're all improved when you start adding in some legume to the mixture. Okay. To a point, of course. And I think, I'll show you some more data, but again, managing the fertility of your stands is just so critical to get that productivity and quality. And you can get good quality feed by harvesting early, but you're not going to get much of it. So again, we're looking at quality digestible fiber per acre, tons per acre. Okay. And there's lots of ways to achieve that, but you have to take care of the soil. You have to take care of the needs of that plant to be able to get the yields and the quality together. All right. So I hear a lot about, I can't keep the clover in my field. It never stays. I don't have enough and I'm sick of trying. And it's true. It's hard to keep clover, legumes in the Northeast. And I will tell you, there is research paper after research paper looking at the persistence of legumes and stands and how long can they last. And it's called a perennial. Doesn't that mean to infinity? Seriously. Okay. But our legumes here, they're under a lot of pressure, and it's not just the weather. It's not just how cold it is, but it's how we manage them. Okay. Your legumes have a very different need than your grass. Okay. And we tend to err on the side, I would say, of doing a bit better with our grass than with our legumes. The other thing is, in a mixed stand, your grasses are badasses. They have a root system that is incredible. And so they can easily outcompete your legumes for nutrition, potassium in particular, because there's just more roots underneath. Okay. So they're more efficient, the grasses are, at grabbing up nutrients that also your legumes need. And if the soil is deficient to begin with, the legumes don't even have a chance, right? So you really have to think about how you're, managing these mixed stands if you truly want it to be a mixed stand. So if you want legumes out there, think about the needs of the legume and the needs of the grass. So if you are deficient in potassium, which I see all over the place, okay, especially you get up outside of the Champlain Valley into the hills, potassium deficient. You're on river bottom, you're potassium deficient. Okay, generally on light textured soils, you're potassium deficient. And I've already been talking about nitrogen, blah, 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 blah. But, one of the things most people are missing is potassium. Okay, so get your soil test. Did somebody just say that? Did somebody go, or was that me? Oh, it's me. Damn soil test. Get your soil test, and look at the soil test. Are you fertilizing for just the grass? What are you missing for the legumes? A lot of the issue we have is the fact that we haven't taken care of the legumes. We just think they should be there. And that's not the case. Okay. pH obviously is a big deal for legumes. It's a big deal for grass too, but grass can survive down to pHs of 5.5. It's not optimal, but legumes really need pHs that are higher, and really like 6.5. Okay. And they need a ton of potassium. So if you're deficient in either of those, why would they want to grow there anyway? Right. So you really have to pay attention to the fertility that's needed by your legumes if you want them to survive. Now, there's a whole bunch more here that we could talk about, like, as an example, red clover. Is it a perennial? Where's Bruce? I feel like you're, yeah, couple years. Okay. It's a biennial generally. So how come it keeps showing up a little bit, right? I've had a lot, but now I only have one little lonely 2, 3, 4 out in the field. Okay. So as we've gotten better, I would say, at managing frequency of harvest, better grazing, we're leaving nothing behind, right? Everything looks like it's been more or less mowed. We're not late on anything. One thing we've kind of forgot about that used to happen a lot when we let things head out, they were dropping seed, right? So our new management is great. We're getting all the stuff. Heather Darby's up here, lots of yields, lots of quality, got to mow on time every 28 days, get those cows out there, it'll grow back, right? But that comes at a cost. And one of the costs is, right, you need more fertility. That red clover isn't heading out anymore, so it doesn't really reseed itself. Okay. Some of the grasses that we used to see, like brome grass. Everybody remember brome grass? I know. Right? Who used to, do you remember mowing brome grass as a kid on the farm when you took 2 cuts a year? One was on the 4th of July and the other one was, before Christmas. Whatever. I remember that. Because, those species were there because that's the kind of management they like. Okay. They like plenty of time in between. They don't like frequent cutting. Red clover would have more time to reseed. You also let that thing go to bloom. My grandfather always used to say that. Oh, you got to let that go to bloom at least once. Anybody else ever hear that about alfalfa or anything? I don't know. Maybe it was that so it would reseed itself. So part of persistence, and longevity of some of these species is limited by just how we manage today. Okay. So just because you went out 5 years ago, maybe 10, and the field that you now call the red clover field, because you reseeded it once in the last 2 decades, has 3 sprigs of red clover in it, and you cannot believe that it just didn't work out for you. It's because of the way we manage today. And like, there is nothing wrong with that, but we also have to think about how that has changed, the species we have and the productivity of it and the longevity of it. All right. So let's talk about management and longevity. All right. So one of the things we really like to do today is, especially when we're making hay, and Sarah Flack has talked about this for probably as long as she can remember, just like letting the plants regrow. Right? When you're grazing, you have a regrowth period. She has another name for it. What's that called? No, not Sarah. Recovery. Thank you, Bruce. So when we're making hay, we're more focused on schedule, less on recovery. And this has been, it's kind of a new thing. Like I said, well, not that new, but we used to take a couple cuts a year, call it good. Got a lot of yield. Whew. But again, digestible yield. But today we're after everything we can get. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. We want to maximize, optimize what we get from our own fields. Want to get as much nutrition out of that. We don't want to buy in feed. We don't want to buy in grain. Okay. And there's also the invention of what's that thing called? Disc mower, the Flowbee of farming that sucks the grass up, and you can cut it right down to the ground as low as you can go, right? So over the past at least 2 decades, which I guess isn't that, it's a long time now, we have gone into mowing super low to the ground, getting as absolute much as we can, right? Off of those fields, and doing that more frequently than we used to. So for a lot of people, that's like a 30-day schedule, 28 days, 32, maybe 34 if it rains. But people are not waiting, right? They're not waiting for it to get to a certain height to replenish its roots. Got to stay on the schedule. And that, I believe, and again, I don't have a ton of evidence, but I think that that clearly has reduced the persistence, right, of the grasses and our legumes. And I went out to a farm this fall, and they said, I got this horrible weed out in my hay field. I don't know why it's there. I can't get rid of it. I got my soil test. She told me to get my soil test. Got my soil test. I put all the fertility on it. I got all the micronutrients on it. I don't know why this weed is there. Well, I finally went out and looked. And what I think was happening was that this individual was mowing on a schedule, mowing. I mean, you could see the bare ground when I went out there. And then it's hot. What are we growing? Perennial cool season pastures. So you mow right to the ground. You can now see the ground, the bare earth, and it's hot and it's dry. So now the soil is hot, even hotter than before. Okay. So you maybe went from a nice soil temperature of 70 degrees with all that lush growing grass. Now it's 100. Everything is shutting down. The plants are shutting down. Nothing is growing. Okay. And then all you can see is brown on the surface. Maybe you throw a little manure on that, gets even worse. Okay. So it's already dormant. It's already growing super, super slow. How does a plant regrow when there's no green on the top? It doesn't die, right? All of a sudden, something's growing. How does it do that? It takes it from its roots. Yeah. It takes all of the energy out of the below ground root system. Remember the big bad one I was talking about? To start regrowing. And how long does that take? Because I know most of you have seen this when it's hot and dry and you've mowed to the weeks, right? Weeks. Oh my goodness. Nothing is growing. Still not growing. You think it died? Then all of a sudden we might get a little sprinkle or something, right? And you start to see one little leaf come. Okay. So what we do know is that when you remove 90% of the above ground biomass, the entire plant stops growing and the root system for 10 days. I think I have a slide on that. Let me get to that. Where is that? Oh, right here. Okay. Remove 90% of the leaves and the roots stop growing 100% for a period of time. I think it's like 10 days. Okay. Now this is from grazing. Nobody ever talked about that in haying. Same thing. And we do this way, way worse in haying, right? So if it's hot and it's dry and it hasn't rained and you've just basically stopped everything, it is going to take everything that plant has out of its root system to regrow. And then, you guys are so mean. Can't believe you do this. That poor grass, you know, it gets, oh, it's like 6 inches and it's 28 days. I got to do it again. You go back out and you cut its head off again. Right? So then it starts to pull more and more out of those roots. So look at that little picture there. So you got the one to the left with all those roots, okay, that this is grazing again, but has been managed to have a recovery period. And then you have the one to the right that didn't have a recovery period. And this is what we see in our hay fields. So why are those species that I just invested all this money in, why are they all dead? Why do I have all these bare spots out in my field? Why are these weeds growing? Things just aren't like they used to be. Well, they aren't. All right. So the other implication this has is on the resiliency of your farms. Okay, grass, it's the creme de la creme for climate change, right? Storing all that carbon, protecting the soil. I don't have time to show you this today, but we evaluated cornfields, hay fields, blah, blah, blah. And we actually found in the fields we evaluated that hay fields that were intensively managed were storing less carbon than cornfields, no-till, manure, rotation. And this is why. So then, right, it gets wet, it gets dry. We can't have healthy soils under grass systems if we're constantly managing this way, right? Okay, so we're going to keep cutting timely. We can't, I don't think we can get around that. But what can we do? It's so simple. Mow high. Thank you. I know you guys were like, could you just get to the point here? But yeah, mow higher. 4 inches. That's all I'm asking for. Okay. 4 inches, really, that is the recommendation for grass. 4 inches. If you're mowing lower for most grasses, okay, you're cutting off the regrowth potential. Okay. And, you know, grasses regrow and they make tillers. So if you're constantly mowing too low, you're eliminating the tillers. So then also, and I know how much people love orchard grass bunches, but instead of having an orchard grass bunch this big, it's like that big. Okay. So just mow higher. 4 inches. That's all we're asking for. Now that also has significant implications for fiber digestibility. Do the cows, when they're grazing, like the pokey stuff at the bottom of the plant? No, you know what they graze. They graze off the top lush stuff, right? So when you're mowing really low like that, you're also getting all the pokey, not so great stuff, right? So you're in some ways you are not in some ways you're lowering the digestible fiber of your crop. So mowing up 4 inches, okay, you're also not getting all the soil in there. That's important in these wet years for sure, any year. You're not impacting yield and you're getting better quality feed. You're protecting your soil, okay? And you're helping your plants live longer. I think that's all I got to say about that. Boop. And we already talked about this. Okay, so grasses regenerate from the top 2 to 4 inch base. Tall fescue is one that regenerates from lower, but most grasses, they need that 4 inches. So meadow fescue and orchard grass, okay, they do not like that low mowing. Actually, you can kill reed canary grass that way too, if you're having a problem with that. Timothy and smooth brome, the one I was talking about, right? They don't actually form their tillers until flowering. So if you're constantly sort of mowing those or grazing them too low, they're not going to persist either. So part of the reason we don't see smooth brome grass anymore. And then tall fescue, like I said, it likes mowing every 30 days. It actually invigorates it. But still, you want to keep that height above 4 inches. Now, for people here that have been in love with alfalfa their entire life, maybe only one in the audience, but you can mow alfalfa lower than that, and that is recommended. But we have mixed stands, we have a lot of grasses, we're trying to promote those. 4 inches, folks, 4 inches. Okay. This is same thing we were just showing. I think I'm out of time. Am I out of time? Nah, they're not even paying attention to me anymore. You know, she's hounding me. I'm driving down here, hounding me. When am I going to be here? At 9:30. My talk wasn't until 10:45. So all of a sudden I think I'm supposed to be here at 9:30. So now I'm freaking out.
It's great. It's so work out.
Okay. Well, anyway, so, okay. All right. I already talked about this. Way to the right in those red numbers are the carbon stocks that we measured in the top 30 centimeters of the soil in these different types of production systems. And so you can see on the top is cornfields. Those are continuous corn. So those had the lowest. That made sense. Then you can see the highest was in these no-till cornfields that were coming actually out of sod in a no-till system with, manure and cover crops and the whole shebang there. That had the highest. And then you can see the grass fields were kind of in between. And I didn't expect that. And that actually is what got me really thinking about what is going on. Okay. So this is a missed opportunity right now for us, and something we really need to pay more attention to, especially with it's not just all the conversation. This isn't conversation. This is real, right? We're in the middle of something going on with the climate that is real. And you are at the mercy of that. Okay, so there are some things you can do in your grass fields. They're not just perfect, right? I mean, we are led to believe that a bit, that we're perfect. Okay, I'm sorry, not me, you guys. I know I'm not perfect. Clearly, I wasn't on time. But we have some room for improvement here and an opportunity, right, for our farms. So. Okay, we already talked. Wow, this same slide over and over and over again. I guess I wanted you really to get it. Got it? Okay. What else can we talk about? That's all pasture stuff. Sarah covers that. I don't know. I mean, I'm not out of things to say, but maybe we should take questions in our last bit of time. And
I will just let you know, I have a roving mic so we can get your question captured.
I think,
there we go. Who would like to ask
our
a question, and I
conversation.
can find you.
We can have a conversation, even though I said we can't. We can. Change my mind. What are you looking at? Yeah. I wasn't sure if I should, so I didn't. All right. We ready? All right. Any questions? Yes.
Do you have anybody cutting on a growing degree day schedule versus a calendar day schedule? I've heard of people starting to do that. Is that something you've seen? Or?
I'm not. I'm an every 28 dayer myself. I'm looking to kick the habit. So well, tell us about it. Are you doing that? What have you heard? No, too late. Too late. I am curious, is anyone else hearing about this? Yeah, Mike.
I did have one farm.
And then it rained when we hit the growing degree.
It was kind of a typical average spring. He did this first cut based on growing degree days. And as I was coring the samples, he was telling me, coring the bales, and he was telling me, I said, I can already tell you what the quality is going to be like. It's crap. And he just gave me this long spiel, and the samples came back, and I said, see, told you. So
Yeah.
my advice is don't do it.
Okay.
Listen to Heather.
Yeah, I think, in all of this, we have to be, right, we have to use what we know best about our farm, the little bit of information and scolding I gave you today, right? And just think about what we can do next. Adaptation, being adaptable, I think is becoming more and more, as much as we all hate that, more and more important. No more questions. Oh, question. Yeah, and if anybody else wants to answer the questions, I'm open to that.
Your experiences where you're limited by the amount of land you have, and you have had variable production because of drought and other weather conditions. And I've been giving a lot more thought to how to protect the farm against drought or severe weather. And I was just curious if that's something that you're spending more time on as a way to talk about varieties of seeds, et cetera.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the, I saw Sarah Ziegler here and Amber, both on my team, Roger, we're all working in this space. Every year's a new year, right? And when you're doing research, you kind of want some consistency, but to us, it's just this opportunity to really understand when we have this drought. And that's actually when we really got on this kick of, cutting height. As you're driving around the landscape and you're seeing what's happening out there, you've seen it before, but you don't pay all that much attention to it. But then you also go back out to your research and you see, well, we just did that, but that variety seems to be coming back, right? And I kind of showed you those 6 pictures, and they all looked really different. This one does well across all these years. Too wet, too dry, good. And so, yes, that is exactly what we're trying to figure out. Who's the steady, right? Who's the one that is there when it's wet, there when it's dry, there when your best friend stops talking to you, like who is that one that's going to be there through all of this? And that's what we are really trying to figure out. But you got to have the conditions to do it, which makes it hard.
I just wanted to go back to what you're talking about for cutting height. And most of the major brands of mowers you can buy extended height shoes for. They're pretty easy to install. They're like $100 each or less. So it's really not a lot of trouble. The Connecticut River Watershed Farmers Alliance has a grant from the state of Vermont to supply these for farmers. So if you're interested, but you just haven't got around to it, talk to the Farmers Alliance. They can help you out. The state of Vermont Agency Ag is funding this because it has water quality benefits in addition to the forage quality benefits that Heather was talking about. And also thinking about, I don't represent the Farmers Alliance, but I work with them a lot. And one of the other things they have is they just bought these 2 strip till machines, which I think would be really interesting for what Heather started talking about early for planting warm season annuals into perennial stods, because they actually till a little strip, and thus you are reducing the competition, and you might actually be able to get that to work. I mean, competition with the existing stand is why it's really hard to get this, and get it to work generally, but if you till a little strip, maybe it'll do it. I may try that myself, and maybe next year I can tell you what happens.
I was just going to quickly add, NRCS also pays for high mowing. I don't know if anybody's here. They don't anymore. All right, never mind. Okay, just shut up. See, I have somebody else.
Our last